Welcome to the Bullpen. In the bullpen today, he's back, my dear brother Armstrong Williams, who is a conservative broadcast owner and journalist, astute businessman, and somebody who has been a conservative thought leader for many years. Mr. Williams, good to have you back on the show. How are you?
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're gonna chop it up. I do apologize. We have a bridge time.
I'm in the business. You don't have to explain to me. I understand.
All right, you know.
No explanation.
So we need to talk. I got to talk about Clarence Thomas with you and his wife Ginni Thomas. And if we have time, we'll talk about Chris Rock and Will Smith. If we don't have time, we'll bring you back. So let me ask you about what has been exposed now. Ginni Thomas, her involvement in the January 6th insurrection, and Clarence Thomas being the lone dissent on the US Supreme Court as it relates to a January 6th dynamic. If you would, I don't want to presume what you know or believe about that scenario. So if you would, provide us your take and I will opine.
So obviously I worked for the justice for many, many years when he was at EEOC.
Yep.
And I remember I hosted the wedding reception for he and his wife, Ginni. You know, Ginni comes from a family of activists. She has very strong opinions. And she has a vision of the world, like activists on the left. To me, they're both the same coin. And so all throughout her career, this is what she has done. I remember, you recall when she picked up the phone and called Anita Hill, the justice's accuser, and asked her to make an apology. And we asked ourselves, what in the world would make someone make a call like that? I mean, this is who she is. She does what she does. I will tell you, Dr. Richey, when the justice learned, when she finally had to confide in him, tell him about those texts and that she would be mentioned, no one could have been more shocked than we were. I mean, it's a marriage. She wants her independence. Her attitude is that he doesn't really need to know what she does, but obviously she should, and I've said this in the New York Times, I've always said this, you've got to exercise better judgment because while you're independent, while you do whatever you want to do, you're an activist, perception matters. How people perceive things matter. And at some point, if this continues, it could have a perception issue with the justice. But I can tell you, he is, as always, was unaware of our activities, unaware of our involvement, and especially unaware of the latest. I mean, marriages are very challenging. He wants her to have her independence. He wants her to have her freedom. And basically, they don't really talk about what each other are involved in. I know you ask yourself, how is it that happened in marriage? Listen, there are people who've been living together for 50 years and wake up the next morning and realize there's so many things about the person they did not know. This is just part of the marriage process. But in terms of him recusing himself, even the vote that you just mentioned, the lone vote, that vote was about the executive powers of a president. How much leeway does a president have in terms of his executive priorities, in terms of what he recorded, what he does, how much of it can be shared with the public? Are there certain things that are just privileged to the president? Had nothing to do with anything else but executive privilege. People can spin it any way they like, but that's exactly what it was.
Okay.
But still, okay, go ahead.
I got to respond to some of this, brother.
You got it. Okay.
Because what you have just told me is that Ginni Thomas is a horrible wife. And let me back up what I'm saying, okay? Her husband is one of the most powerful people in this country. She's connected to that by choice. She doesn't have to be there. Now, when we talk about his refusal to recuse himself from the last ruling that was involved, the high or the high profile ruling that involved January 6th. It's a coincidence, is what you want us to believe, Mr. Armstrong. It's a coincidence that Ginni Thomas was on the record for siding with President Trump as it relates to his executive powers extending beyond his presidency. She's on the record for saying that. The Supreme Court, the only Supreme Court justice who agreed with her happened to be her husband. and all of the other Supreme Court justices, including the ultra-conservative ones, disagreed with her and disagreed with her husband. So you want us to believe that the fact that Mrs. Thomas was for executive privilege extending beyond presidency, and that her husband, as a Supreme Court justice, was for that as well. But every other legal scholar said no, that makes no sense at all. We've never.
Well, let me respond to you, because you're putting me in an interesting position today where you are forcing me to defend the justice's wife. She's not a horrible wife. In fact, she's a wonderful wife. There's a certain aspect of what she does.
And she made some unwise decisions, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. At least you said that.
She's not a horrible wife. You made me laugh, which is great. Also, we're only aware of how justice was voted in this case. We have no idea how the other justices voted, because they would not allow themselves to be placed on the public record exactly how they did vote. So you're saying that they voted 8-1. That is not true. You just don't know, because of the record, how the other justices voted in that matter.
This is very fascinating. All right, so we have enough conjecture here, common sense applied, to know individuals that said, all right, Trump does not have the power to extend executive privilege beyond the presidency. But let me ask you this very simple question, because I think sometimes we get so involved in legal scholarship, we miss the common point. Do you believe that a president's executive authority should extend beyond that person being president of the United States?
Let me say this. I was inside, I was inside the Capitol on January 6th.
Okay.
There is no question that former President Donald Trump fomented the atmosphere that led to that insurrection. Okay. I was inside that Capitol.
Why were you at the Capitol, brother? You weren't part of the rally, were you?
I was a journalist. I was covering.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, brother. I just got asked, brother.
Fair question. It's okay. It's fair question, my man. You got to get it in, brother. Listen, those were Trump supporters. Okay, they were not only urinated and defecated and creating violence. It was one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in my life. So there's no question that Trump bears responsibility. Again, you're putting me in a position. I'm not here to defend Trump. I agree with you. I've always agreed with you on this issue.
Right.
But still, Thomas's wife admitted she attended the rally. And
she admitted a year later. Wait a minute, all due respect.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Williams, exactly right. She kept it secret. She kept it secret. So that means she went there in a disguise. That's what that means.
Guess what? She kept it a secret to all of us, not just you.
Do you think she kept it a secret to her husband?
Yeah, she did.
That's a bad wife, brother. I'm sorry.
No, it's not
no, brother.
No, I'm not going.
You're talking about something that I have to professionally be involved. Just think about it this way. Let's take it out of the context of the Supreme Court. Let's say, okay, you're married, you got your wife, you as a professional and her as a professional. There's a case coming up that will garner national attention and likely put you in the line of fire, even more so because of her actions. And she doesn't tell you that you have to make decisions on issues.
You're assuming they have conversations, and she has such.
I do assume that married people have conversations, Mr. Williams. You are absolutely correct.
Yeah, you're making an assumption, which is fair. Most people will make that assumption. But this is why you have me on, so I can inject another perspective. And that perspective is, he is totally in, as he's always been about her activities. I know firsthand in the.
But her actions are problematic, brother.
Yes, they are.
Okay,
we agree.
You're asking people, and you understand in good faith why people won't believe that, right? Like, wait a minute, there's too many coincidences here.
I get it. All right. But you also know in your lifetime, sometimes coincidences doesn't necessarily prove a point. They're just coincidences.
All right, so
they just happen by chance. You know this.
Let me ask you this question. Okay. We know that Virginia Thomas has a long activist career.
Yes.
We know her entanglement with Citizens United and everything else, right? So when you know this, all right, so I'm gonna pose this question, we're running out of time. When you know this about Miss Thomas, when you know this, you're Mr. Thomas, okay? All right, he has a duty, a moral obligation to recuse himself, not just because of unfairness in a ruling, but the appearance of unfairness in a ruling. And if his wife refuses to tell him what she's involved in, as you have suggested, that means, brother, that she, in my opinion, is not doing well in her relationship with him, because he has a noble duty to recuse himself. And if she continues to act in this way, she is violating a trust tenet, in my opinion, because he has this duty to recuse.
Let me say this to you. There's no question she's violating an oath in the marriage to protect him at all costs, be aware of the kind of judgment she makes, the kind of things she supports, and the kinds of things she has done over time. But guess what? She has never done that. She's always done exactly what she wants to do. That's who she is.
I got you.
Let me just say this. Justice Thomas, in terms of recusing himself, you have to assume that the Supreme Court now will accept any kind of case dealing with January 6th. There's a different bar there. But I do believe there is a legitimate argument that if this if it comes before the Supreme Court, that Justice Thomas should consider recusing himself because of the perception of this whole mess that his wife finds herself.
All right, good enough on that. You have intellectual integrity on that issue. You actually did not answer my question now. I caught that, but I just want to make it comfortable again. Do you agree that a president and their executive authority outlives their presidency?
No.
All right, so you disagree with your friend Clarence.
Justice Thomas, you know what?
Justice Thomas, you disagree with your buddy Justice Thomas.
We disagree, and that's a good thing, because if we both agree that somebody's not necessary.
That's right,
on everything.
Man, well said. Always good to have you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, brother, for gracing us with your presence.
Yeah, and remember, again, Ginni, I did not say you are a horrible wife. I said you should use better judgment. I say this to you all the time, but I know he loves you, you love him, but my God, you gotta stop putting him in these kinds of situations. You gotta use better judgment. That's what I'm saying. Because I know you are a good wife. I'll give you that.
All right, thank you, brother. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.